In this video, we will go over an example for writing task 1 of the IELTS General Training Exam. Let's have a look at the prompt. It says, you recently had a poor experience while going through airport security for your flight. Write a letter to the airport. In your letter, describe the situation you were in, explain how you felt during this experience, request the airport to take action. To do well in this section, there are 3 elements you should follow. The first element is to read the question and understand the context. Consider what is happening in this scenario. We are wanting to board a flight. To do that, we can imagine needing the necessary travel documents, going to the airport, checking in, going through security, waiting at your gate, and so forth. Maybe you are going on a holiday. Maybe you are going on a business trip, or maybe you are just seeing friends and family. Whatever the reason, we are going somewhere by plane. We can also note that this is a formal letter, as we are sending a letter to an unknown recipient within the airport. The prompt will request us to write Dear Sir or Madam, which is already a good indication of a formal letter, and we will use formal language to politely address the recipient. Finally, we can conclude that this letter will be structured as a complaint letter since we are responding to a negative situation and demanding action. The second element is to prepare your response. Since we understand the context of being at an airport, we need to think of an experience that we can use to fulfill these tasks. Some people may have had a bad experience with airport security, but even if you haven't, understanding the context will help you create your story for this response. We also need to structure our response in the form of a letter where each paragraph has a key point supported by evidence. This is the basis of any kind of formal essay writing. Here are the 3 key points I would consider for each task. Number 1. Airport security shouted at me for not understanding instructions. Number 2. I felt terrible after this incident. Number 3. I would demand the airport to educate security on common courtesy. It is generally good practice to put the key points first as topic sentences, but sometimes this isn't always the case. For instance, if we are describing a situation, we may not want to put the key point at the beginning of the paragraph, as we are setting the context. Finally, the third element is to start writing. As you write, don't forget that our language needs to be formal and that our grammar should always be accurate. You should also vary your sentences and have appropriate vocabulary. Before we begin, here is a structure we will use to guide our writing of this letter. Let's start writing. First, we need to open our letter with an introduction. We can use the following phrase, I am writing to express my dissatisfaction, to represent our complaint in this formal letter. There are, of course, many other ways to open complaint letters, but we will go ahead with this one. So let's write, I am writing to express my dissatisfaction with. Who are we dissatisfied with? The prompt gives away the answer. It is airport security. Why? Because of the poor service. Let's add this in. Airport security and the poor level of service I received from them. Great. Now let's move on to paragraph 1, where we will set the context. Again, although it is helpful to put your key point at the beginning of the paragraph, we are illustrating a scenario and it may not flow well in a narrative sense to give away the problem right away. So, let's begin with a sentence that sets the stage and introduces the why for going to the airport. So let's write on April 4th, I was at the airport to board my flight to London for my business trip. You can fill in anything you like, but this sentence is indicating some date of when we were at the airport and the reason for going. Now, let's add a sentence to transition to the part about airport security. I was required to go through airport security before heading to my gate. We could have said so much more about our check-in, our luggage, and so forth, but we really want to get to the point and introduce ourselves having to go through airport security. Now, let's consider a poor experience that could happen at this location. Again, you can fill in anything you like, but I can imagine that airport security is a busy place and that the staff would prefer everyone to move as quickly as possible. Maybe they were working long hours as well. Let's create a situation where we would slow this down and irritate the staff. So we can write, upon arriving at the baggage conveyor belt, I was unsure where the trays were located to place my belongings. My hesitancy, there we go, then caused one of the security personnel to shout at me for taking too much time. Let's dissect this. And this also concludes the first paragraph. We have set the scene of the airport, described the need to go through airport security, and showcased our poor experience. This accomplishes the first task, describe the situation you were in. Notice that in the first sentence, this sentence here, I used a dependent clause at the beginning to inform the reader that we reached a crucial section of the security area, followed by the independent clause of us being confused. If we were to reverse this order, there would be less of a flow, since the introduction of trays would be confusing without some transition that we have gone to the baggage conveyor belt. Although it is grammatically correct, it is important to have a clean style to score points on coherence and cohesion. For the second sentence, this one here, I opted to use a different structure to vary what was written instead of repeating the same structure over and over, even if it is a complex sentence. Notice how I also used a transition word, then, to ensure continuity of the story and placed my hesitancy as the subject to mix up the usual I as the subject of several sentences. These tricks can help move your sentences beyond simple structures. Now, we move on to the second task of how this experience made us feel. How would we feel if airport security shouted at us? Of course, we would feel terrible. Let's state this right away as a key point and back this up with supporting evidence. So, the first thing I would write is, this regrettable experience ruined my entire journey to London. Very straightforward and to the point. Notice how we included the adjective regrettable to emphasize our disappointment, as well as strong language such as ruined. Let's expand on this and explain how this exactly ruined our journey. By having this altercation, the airport security staff, I spelled that wrong, security staff, there we go, made me feel ashamed of something that could have been politely explained. Again, notice that I began with a simple sentence structure and followed it with a complex sentence that begins with the dependent clause. So this one here. Varying your sentence structure matters. As for the evidence, we argue that it is the airport staff that caused these negative emotions, and we add an expectation that something like this could have been politely dealt with. Failing to meet this standard clearly places blame on the staff for doing a poor job. So let's keep writing. I felt so guilty that I could not even think about my work obligations to London. To really emphasize the point, I included a sentence on the consequences of these negative emotions. The guilt that we experienced cascaded into the rest of our journey, where we could have been planning for this London work trip. This sentence also loops nicely back to our key point in this paragraph by explaining how this experience ruined our journey. So, with our second task done, let's move on to the third task. What do we want the airport to do about our experience? If it has to do with the staff, we would certainly expect some punitive measures for those who treated passengers poorly. We would also want to ensure that the rest of the staff would never engage in such behavior. Let's state what we expect the airport to do. Because of this poor service, I expect the airport to reevaluate its staff training and to discipline staff who treat passengers in a disparaging way. This sentence tackles our two requests to educate the staff in having improved courtesy and to punish those who shout at passengers. Presumably, the staff are already trained, but given this incident, we would expect a more robust training to reduce the likelihood of bad service. We would also expect disciplinary action to deter staff from continuing this behavior. Let's wrap up this section by urging the airport to act quickly. I hope you will address this matter immediately, as I certainly, I think I spelled that wrong. Immediately, there we go. As I certainly do not wish for others to experience this mistreatment. Here, we added a sense of urgency to bolster its importance. We also bring up other passengers as we may assume that they will be mistreated without the matter being settled immediately. Appealing to both urgency and other people would bolster our claim and provide a strong conclusion for the airport to take action. With our 3 tasks completed, let's close our letter with a looking forward statement and add in the word prompt to really appeal to the sense of urgency. I look forward to your prompt response. And we finally sign off with this standard send-off for formal letters. Yours faithfully, and we'll just write John Doe. I hope this helps you get a better understanding of how you can tackle this type of writing task. You can also check out my blog post of this example on my website linked here. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and click the bell icon if you benefited from this content. Thank you.